But how old are you then? I said I'm 40. I look young. I eat chicken feet, so my life is great. Do you think the way we are doing games in Web3 today, which is almost play to earn, is that changing from the last bull market?
It has absolutely changed.
Oh, tell me more.
I think
I'm giving away $100 in every episode. All you need to do is to comment your favorite part of the episode along with your Twitter account, hit the like button, and the winner will be picked up every single week.
I feel like Mr. Boom.
Hey guys, today a new episode of Troy, the room of Eljaboom. I made this show because, as I keep saying, I think we're lacking in Web3 of having genuine chat where nothing is prepared, where we get people from different industry in Web3, regardless they are builders, VCs, founders, even developers. But they come and they show the new side that people are missing in Web3, where everyone comes speaks, because here we don't have anything prepared. So no prepared questions or anything. It's just genuine chat. Today, it's the first VC actually coming to the show. And he's very well known in the space. Recently, mashallah, he's at every place. He's a shining star. But we want to ask and know more. So let's start. Yat Siu, how are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm great. I think Dubai's actually been incredible and pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. I know it was a short notice and Rabia did a great job by managing it. She's actually a good asset in my kind of opinion. She's a very humble person. We want to know before the Web3, who was Yat Siu? More about you, basically.
Well, I mean, I think who was Yat Siu? So Yat Siu grew up in Austria, in Vienna. I'm a child of the 70s, so I'm definitely probably older than most people in Web3, I would imagine.
I'm 40.
Exactly, so we're close.
Okay.
And I studied music. So my parents were musicians, and they left. I mean, this was a different era, but basically left China, or specifically in my mom's case, Taiwan, and went to Austria to study music. Mm-hmm. And so they met each other there, had me, and in classic Asian tiger parenting style, they thought I should be a musician as well. So I studied music in Vienna first. Then afterwards, though, I wasn't a very talented musician, but I ended up basically, writing tools to help me compose music better, because I wasn't as great as my peers. And that was my introduction to really sort of the computer industry, you could say. My computer that I used to program on, in this case, was an Atari ST, that had MIDI ports, and I was basically able to write basically a notation software, which my teacher didn't much appreciate, because remember, that was an era where even calculators were not allowed in school. But I was able to upload the software in a pre-internet service called CompuServe. And the community at CompuServe really liked the software, and they started sending me checks in the mail, and I was like just a kid. How old are you? Then I was about 13 years old or so.
Oh, right? That was early, okay.
Yeah, like very, very early. And that eventually led to a job at Atari, where Atari basically reached out to me on CompuServe. And for those who might remember, CompuServe, your email is not your name. Your email is a number. You're like 7163456 dot something 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 at CompuServe. And you basically communicated with complete strangers. They said, hey, they had a small office like a one-man office in Vienna. They said, come over, we might have an opportunity. And I popped over, having never seen anyone, and in walks this sort of lanky, squawky sort of kid. Yeah. And they're like, who are you? Like, you asked me to come here for an opportunity. And I was like, really? And basically, eventually, it led to a sort of early career at Atari, which then basically mushroomed into me getting involved in the internet very early on. We built basically, sort of OpenGL sort of modelers. We actually were building on what used to be known as VRML. So VRML was the HTML version of virtual reality, and had a stint at SGI before I came to Asia. Started one of Asia's first ISPs called Hong Kong Online, at least in Hong Kong, and one of the first cloud computing businesses with Outblaze before starting Animoca Brands, which was Outblaze was sold to IBM back in 2009, which really sort of began the journey for us to come back into video gaming, and essentially sort of laid the foundation for what would eventually become Animoca Brands. Right. So, but other than that, I'm a proud father of 3 kids. My oldest is already working, so basically
working with Animoca.
No. He was working for companies like Layer Zero, right? Basically, he's in the blockchain industry.
Oh, okay, so the same industry.
So yeah, but he never worked for us.
Yeah.
He holds a lot of like apes and stuff like that, and so he's been early in the degen area, which by the way is interesting. Even for the Mochaverse holders, we find a few sort of really young, or so we say teenager kids who hold our NFTs, and sort of really happy about that. So that's really great to see as well. And of course, a daughter and a younger son, basically, and of course, been married really, for I would say, I don't know, like 23, 24 years. Yes, yeah, I forget, but either way, yeah. So yeah, it's been.
But how old are you then? I said I'm 40. I look young. I eat chicken feet, so my life is great.
I'm this year I'll be 51.
Not much difference.
Yeah, it's all relative.
Chicken feet always keep you young.
It's a collagen.
Yeah, collagen.
It's a collagen.
The best thing
Absolutely,
you can.
yes.
I love it. I love hot pot.
Yes.
Because you don't. At least I'm trying to lose weight eating it because they have something called see you tomorrow,
right,
which is the mushroom. It doesn't digest, it just goes out. So it's great. So you started now Animoca. When Animoca got actually started?
So the origin of Animoca really started in 2011 as a gaming company.
Okay.
And it was really mobile gaming, which, we had a hit called Pretty Pet Salon that did really well.
So we started as a Web2 company, basically.
It's a Web2 company. It's a Web2 gaming company. I mean, back then, really, if you think about 2011, it was really about Bitcoin. Yeah. And we were not into the Bitcoin era.
Yeah, and you cannot build anything because at that time it was not really easy.
And it was something that I had an intellectual interest in, but I really wasn't embracing it. It was really primarily basically just doing Web2 games, and we were quite successful in the first couple of years until Apple deplatformed us, right? So Apple basically removed all of our apps because they didn't like how we were marketing our apps, I think. Again, they never told us, right? That was kind of the first time we ended up experiencing what centralized ecosystems, what App Store would present, right? But the journey of where, Animoca Brands became a Web3 company was really in 2017. So we had a studio called Fuel Powered that shared an office with another company called Axiom Zen. And they were basically working together on this little project called CryptoKitties. And CryptoKitties, obviously, is for those who know, the advent of the ERC 721, basically bringing NFTs to the Ethereum ecosystem, basically really ground Ethereum to a halt. But, I think they sold like $40 million worth of cats that people were breeding. And that's kind of when we realized, wait, there's something there about how we could actually really have digital ownership and actually have a sovereign title that would be controlled by the community. That was fascinating for us. It was really about decentralizing asset ownership at the time. And so we learned about it, very quickly doubled down on it, ended up becoming an investor in what became Dapper Labs, and then basically sort of proceeded to say, well, this, back then we didn't call it Web3, right? It was really sort of blockchain games and NFTs. We basically doubled down in that era. And that's when we acquired the Sandbox, and that's when we invested in companies like Sky Mavis, which is Axie Infinity, and Decentraland, and Wax, and basically all these companies that have become more household today, like OpenSea as well. And so that was really
OpenSea. Is it a part of?
Yes, we invested in OpenSea.
As an investor, yes, okay.
Yeah, back in 2018 as well, and that was basically the foundation of us really entering Web3 in a very meaningful way. So I would say the Animoca Brands that people know of, right, which is the Web3 company that's trying to push digital property rights, was really a late 2017, 2018 construction.
So yeah, I mean, this is like a new information for me, at least, that Animoca started as a Web2 gaming company and then start to scaling after the centralized power of the big sharks, which I don't know how we can stop them at some point. I'm not sure even if blockchain, even in AI, now they're trying to compete with AI and come inside to take this industry somewhere or another. And then you jump to Web3. And when you mentioned actually Sandbox, I used to play a game back in the days called Second Life.
Sure.
Yeah. And I had 3 companies inside. I started like 2003 when it actually started. So I made 3 companies. One of them was a breedable company, and one of them fashion, and one of them semi-casino. Before they start, the US start putting some rules where they actually didn't allow any state beside the states that are licensed to play casinos to play inside these lands. And the breedables inside the game actually is something I wish I can see it even in a game like Sandbox. Why do I need to make a project separate where I can just go make breedable between, I don't know, 2 species, right? I can just make it inside the game so I can live the experience, because you can do auctions, you can do so many things. I had 3 sims. I paid for every sim $1,000 a month. So I used to pay $3,000 a month.
Yeah.
I had 6 auctions every day, live auctions for these bundles and horses, and you can even sell the stud.
Right.
If you have like albino horse or whatever. So that's what the part, like now, yes, we have games. The depth that we need to move, what is your perspective from there? Because we have so many things happening, right? So many games left and right coming in the space, but there some kind or another missing the element where the depth is not there to a certain limit.
Yeah, so first I would, if we look at, for instance, the depth of the market right now for Web3 games, it's, we're on the second cycle, right? The first cycle was led by companies like Sandbox and Axie Infinity. This new cycle that we're seeing right now, obviously companies like Pixels, things like Ronin Chain, for instance, are developing, and of course the rebirth of effectively Axie Infinity, and even sort of Sandbox and other projects sort of re-emerging in their sort of, let's call it, new renaissance with new models and new designs. I think right now I still see ourselves as a little bit like a 2011, 2012 mobile gaming narrative. So we think, for instance, that the adoption of gaming in Web3 gaming will basically come from a more casual and more passive gameplay. So to understand how we think about Web3 gaming today, which has changed, right? Because these are some of the lessons we've learned. It's important to understand what happened when we went from console to mobile gaming. So for a lot of people, they think that the innovation of mobile gaming was the fact that it was portable. But the Game Boy did that actually much earlier. And people also forget that, back in 2009, 2010, the gaming industry was actually coming to a halt. It wasn't growing anymore. There were hundreds of millions of gamers, not billions as they are today, and the console industry was stuck. And it turned out that what mobile gaming did, it wasn't the portable aspect, it was the fact that it mass amateurized gaming. And that's how they brought billions of people. Through the swipe of a finger, basically with games like Angry Birds, or games like Mafia Wars, or Candy Crush later on, you ended up becoming a really good gamer. Which meant that a person who couldn't use the controller that well could now have fun playing games. That was a real innovation. It was basically like what Instagram did to photography, basically the handheld device basically did for mobile gaming. And so we went from hundreds of millions of gamers to billions of gamers, today 3.4 billion gamers because of that. And then what happened was that a percentage of these new gamers who were playing Candy Crush and Angry Birds and Pretty Pet Salon, for instance, they ended up basically a percentage saying, hey, I like gaming, I want the next level of gaming. And then they started buying consoles. And so the PlayStation 3 was a disaster, it didn't sell well, but the PlayStation 4 flew off the shelves and people were like demanding it like crazy, because essentially the mobile gaming user basically wanted to have a hardcore, more like, the more immersive gaming
more
experience.
than casual, yes.
Exactly. And so that was that translation. So that was that innovation. In Web3, we believe now that the Web3 gamer or the Web3 user, being a land or NFT holder or token holder, is a different type of gamer who is a more passive gamer. We have 3.4 billion people who play games, which means we have about another 3 billion people online and growing who do not play games.
Do not play games.
Yes. And those guys actually are the ones who do want to participate in gaming ecosystem, but they can't have, even swiping a finger is too much work, right? They participate through ownership. And so what we're now seeing is that the ownership paradigm is basically creating a capital class in Web3 gaming, whereas the labor class, which is the Web2 gamer, is more the one who are active inside of games. We're seeing this effect in things like Axie Infinity and to some extent Pixels, right? And we sort of introduced some of these in from the Mochaverse. Anyway, so we think a similar effect will take place, meaning that the conversion of Web2 to Web3 gamers won't be the path in which we think much of the growth will happen in the short term. Rather, we think what will happen is that it's the person who's not playing games, or maybe the Web3 owner of tokens who wants to participate passively, they're going to be the ones driving the industry. And so far, that thesis has proven out for the time being. And we will hopefully get billions of people who don't play games to participate through ownership. And then they translate through to the gaming industry. And then it all becomes a bit of a mesh.
So to simplify what you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying to convert an esport player to Web3 games is not as easy as to convert a non-player at all, because for him it's the first time to have that experience, correct?
Correct. And also it's geographic as well. So for instance, it's easier to convert an Asian Web2 gamer from, say, Taiwan or Korea than it is to convert a Western. And that, I think, has a Western gamer. And I think that has a lot to do with perspectives on money and capitalism.
That's true. Actually, that's actually an interesting point. I'm thinking, I'm doing some analysis in my head.
Yes.
Because I'm a gamer. I used to play World of Warcraft, and that's how I
Sure.
came to Bitcoin, 2010. Because I used to be number 7 in the world warlock, so I used to get boost. I boost people paying Bitcoin, and I used to be anonymous, and I got doxxed by CZ actually, and he tweeted about it because I was just living in Saudi, and Saudi, we didn't have any crypto regulations, and I'm always like to play safe. So I used to be Eljaboom, which is the cartoon, which is the one behind.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I do see, again, the part of, and again, I'm just analyzing it, like, do you think the way we are doing games in Web3 today, which is almost play to earn, like you have to play and to get money, do you think in the short term, is that changing from the last bull market?
It has absolutely changed.
Oh, tell me
Yes.
more.
I think when you think about the Web3 gamer, so the Web3 gaming experience in the last bull market was driven primarily by a labor class, right? And on the other side, there was a capital class that basically was more speculative in nature, right? So it drove value in the token, but basically people who were playing basically things like Infinity, basically they were just making money and then they were just cashing it out at 100%. The time, right? Because they weren't actually Web3 natives. And I think this is the other thing. If you're not a Web3 native, you don't have an investing mindset. What we've learned is to be truly converted to Web3 means you basically have an investor mindset. I'm not saying you're an investor. It's just you take a perspective that things you do in life has a sort of investing lens. And that actually gives you a more long-term lens on things. This new cycle, actually, the successful Web3 games are more Web3 native, meaning they're addressing the capital class much earlier on. And the labor class, which is basically more of a Web2 gamer for the time being, they're participating, but they're not necessarily the majority of the game itself. And that's because the Web2 gamer still in the cycle is more of a net extractor. And the Web3 gamer, or the Web3 user, shall we say, thinks of it more of a long-term investment. And I think of it like an economy, right? I mean, imagine what happens to an economy like in Dubai if nobody was investing, if nobody was buying real estate, right? Actually, the economy would be, sure, it's a labor economy, but actually it would not be worth much at all.
Exactly.
Right, exactly.
It's not going to grow.
Exactly, it's not going to grow. So you need that investing mindset. And so I think the success of the Web3 games today have more of an investing mindset. I think the speculative nature, of course, while it hasn't completely gone away, and I don't think it ever will, because we live in a capitalist structure.
You need it.
Yeah, you need it.
You need it.
Is that it's also become more balanced, but we're not at a point where it's 50-50. It's still majority on the financial side. When we think about sort of network effects inside these games, unlike Web 2, in Web 3, you have financial network effects. And financial network effects tend to actually accelerate faster and compound deeper than the utility network effects. Utility network effects really need more users. But financial network effects need liquidity. And so that means a small number of users can create financial network effects much faster, whereas for a utility network effect, you need a lot of users. And so in Web3, you combine them. And so right now, the financial narratives provide that power. And so if you focus on the Web3 user, you receive stronger financial network effects, which then as a result grow the ecosystem, which then draws and attracts basically people from Web2 more broadly. And that's basically what we're seeing. We see this with games, whether it's like Pixels and Axie Infinity, basically since its relaunch, and it's doing really well. And also, of course, we've gotten smarter on the tokenomics, right? I mean, again, this is an economic design experiment that is
Mo's doing a good job.
Yes, well, Mo's doing a great job, but I think the whole industry, you learn from the lessons of the past, right? You don't basically just make the same mistakes over and over again. So again, we've got better primitives, we've got better design principles, and that's kind of the state of the world we're in right now. So it's a constant evolution. I mean, that is progress, right?
That's true. And now, I'm a bit. I'm not gonna ask questions. I like to ask new questions when
Please,
I'm thinking, when I'm just digesting with you, right?
Let's go.
Now, you're mainly like, okay, I'm gonna discuss this later on, but today you have investment in so many games and etc. But after you find games, some of them, of course, on chain, off chain, there's a different story, and the project, some of them deploy in different chains, right? Some of them in Ethereum, some of them in Solana, whatever. Base, BNB chain, OPBNB, etc. Since you are mainly, which is going to open another question, focused in games, let's say, haven't you ever took the lead of either acquiring or developing or investing in a gaming chain where you are sure the scalability are there? Because today there is a big difference between people are building a game and someone understands from the other people mistakes which chain for sustainability, etc., etc. Because if I was wrong, we wouldn't find games every day in a different chain.
Of course.
So they're all trial and error, or they follow liquidity, which is in Ethereum, where you have the drive today to get all these projects, make them in, let's say, X chain, right? Where you know the scalability is there. And of course, when you do that, like all the users going to come from all of them combined,
Sure.
and the
Yeah.
liquidity will follow after. Is that a part that in your vision or no? Everyone just try.
The answer is no. And the reason why is that we believe in a cross-chain future. And I'll explain some more thesis points. By the way, we get asked this question a lot. Everyone's like, is there going to be an Animoca chain? Why aren't you building your L2? Maybe it's an L1, especially with the size of our ecosystem. So first, we consider ourselves a content company in the sense that content is the future asset class, we think, as in we think culture is a future asset class. And so from our perspective, how do we best serve the culture class? It's to make culture available in every system in the world, in every place in the world. So I shared the story about sort of what happened to us in the App Store. You can think in some ways of a L1, L2 as a kind of an app store. Of course, it's decentralized, but still there's certain aspects of culture and I guess sort of, traditions that you could say that exist in these chains that are different, right? I mean, at the end of the day, whether you look at Polygon, which we're involved in, Immutable, which we're involved in, Ronin we're involved in, right? We also have stakes in, obviously things like Solana and of course, Bearer Chain as well even, and basically Ton, right? Like all of these ecosystems, they're unique ecosystems that have a culture of their own, that have a quality of their own, that don't necessarily bridge over. I mean, we're even building on a Bitcoin ecosystem with,
Yes.
Life Beyond, for instance, right? So all of these ecosystems actually sit apart. And if we want our content, basically our sort of our culture assets, to basically have the best maximum effect, they need to be available on every chain. They can't be available only in one chain, which also means that we should, we want to stay neutral in the sense that we want to be sort of be able to deliver our content across multiple chains. And we kind of see this today, right? If you look at, for instance, if you're doing ordinals as in inscriptions on Bitcoin, those don't necessarily cross over to Ethereum, but you want to be able to address both markets, for instance, right? And I feel also that when you start building your own chain, while it may be necessary, some people might feel, I mean, Ronin did it, but also Flow did it, like with Dapper Labs, you inherently also start building in your own conflict of interest. Like if we ended up building our own chain, what will end up happening is that we will divert our focus and attention to building our own chain. And when we do that, we end up basically sort of driving network effects away from what we think is best for the content or for the creator and what we think is best for our chain. Which, again, I think it's better for the chains to do the chain stuff and for us to basically stay in the culture side of things. And again, I think we'll serve the network a brighter and better purpose if our incentives are aligned on content. And for us, content is king. I mean, yes, there's a famous expression, content is king and distribution is queen and she wears the pants, right? That's why we, for instance, basically also work on Ton. We think of L1, L2s as forms of distribution layers as well. But at the end, the long-term utility will come from the content that is the culture, and that's what we want to focus on. So you would not expect us to basically be launching our own L1, L2 anytime soon. And we're one of the few companies, I think, in the world that have friendly relationships with every L1, L2 because we provide value for all of them. And I think that's a better place for us to be.
See, after I heard your answer, I mean, yes, it's good to stay, like what I like about Ethereum, he's not trying to acquire anything. Just let it who want to build, come. If you don't want to build, it's your choice. I'm not going to go acquire OpenSea or whatever. I'm going to compete OpenSea or I'm going to make my own Uniswap, etc. Right? And plus that, we still don't know what is till today, still early, which actually good chain for any project in the mid and long term. It's very early. We're still discovering.
Correct. But I also believe there's going to be thousands of chains. I don't believe that there's going to be just one or two, because I think when you think about consensus
At the moment, we have
mechanisms-
850.
Yeah, but I mean, not all of them will survive maybe, but the point is that we'll still have many of them, because what will happen is that liquidity in these chains are reasonably strong. And I think of them almost like cities or countries.
Yeah.
And we will choose to be in places that sort of suit us because maybe we have a certain community there or we kind of a certain network there. And I don't think of it as completely meshed. Also in Web3, liquidity is shared because the network effects in Web3 basically can be bridged across. Therefore, just because you're on one chain doesn't mean the liquidity is entirely locked. You can move things around as well, which basically means that you'll have a lot of sort of cross transfer of assets in the future, even more so than they are today. And we see this, by the way, when people are basically liquidity farming, right? They're moving from one chain to the other chain. And now you can do that, which you couldn't really do, say, 5 years ago.
I mean, as long as the bridge is going to be secured,
that's another topic. But yes,
that's something is really, really happened, and it's bad. I mean, it happened to a few projects in the last year and
yes, of course,
in the last bull market as well. So now I will just jump out of this, and then I say, you're Austrian, right?
Yes.
Born
and raised in Austria, but I'm Chinese.
Of course.
And I live in Hong Kong.
So I can tell you, ni hao.
Yes.
And then you decided to go to Saudi.
Yes.
Why did you go to Saudi?
So, first, Saudi as a region, we like to describe like the China of the Middle East, right? In the sense of its economic might, its influence, its power, and its impact, and also, in some way, its vision. I think when we saw Saudi for the first time some years ago, we were impressed in terms of the vision of the country and what it wanted to go, with Vision 2030 and basically everything that they're doing there in the kingdom. But also we appreciated, having lived in Hong Kong and being part of the greater China story, what a top-down vision to build something amazing can deliver, right? I mean, for most people who don't really realize, when you look at a project like NEOM, which we're involved in Saudi and have basically been big supporters of, and they've been supporting us as well.
They invested in Animoca.
That's right. They invested in Animoca,
right?
Correct. To help them basically build out sort of a Web3 strategy and sort of, help them sort of fulfill their vision of basically a smart city and so forth. But, in the outside, from a let's call it Chinese perspective, you look at a project like NEOM and you go, that's crazy. That's insane. That's not going to work. But actually, if you lived in Hong Kong, you would have seen right next door a place like Shenzhen that was basically a swampland.
Visit Shenzhen actually.
Yeah, and if you go there, I mean that place is modern.
It's a new city.
It's a size of Shenzhen in the Guangdong region. It's basically a country, right? So they basically built something from scratch that had nothing, no economy, no system,
and it's very clean. It's very beautiful. I love it.
Exactly. So China can do this because of a top-down vision and a commitment. And so we said, well, you know what? If there's one place in the world other than China that can do this, it'll be Saudi. Because there were many similar elements of the top-down vision. By the way, some other similarity that we see is the excitement in the country. For those who visit Saudi, you notice that people are excited about the country, right? It's not just a sense of patriotism or nationalism, it's just a sense of pride. And also, many overseas Saudis are coming back to Saudi to say, you know what, I'm going to build and do something here to help make the country basically stronger, which was the same thing what we call sea turtles. The Chinese sea turtles that basically came back, they helped really sort of build up China, who were educated overseas in America and basically brought the know-how and helped build this for opportunity as well, but also basically help build the country. So we saw these parallels and we said, wait, we think Saudi is going to be sort of creating incredible impact in the region. We were already looking at the space. Plus, it has a very young population of which the majority
are below 30.
Yes, and they play games, right? And it's one of the highest.
And they pay.
It's one of the highest ARPU markets in the world, right? So there's many factors. I mean, Saudi is probably the only country in the world that has a sovereign gaming fund with Savvy. Yeah, was a $38+ billion, right? Which is already quite impressive. And they have an esports minister, and they have like all these things that they're doing over there that you would not think of if you've never visited the country. So we're very impressed, and we decided that we're going to sort of build something there up, and so we launched and announced the Web3 Hub. And in fact, in a few days, actually just 2 days from now, we're going to have a Web3 Saudi event with Outer Edge, which is basically hopefully will be a very successful event to sort of bring more of the Web3 community into Saudi. It'll be in Riyadh. Yeah.
Inshallah. Yeah. Did you eat Saudi food or not, by the way?
I love it. Yes, exactly.
So Mandi, all this.
Yes, I mean, I've been to Saudi many times in the last year and a half, right, just to build the relationships. And again, I think there's some similarities to Asian culture and Saudi culture in that I think it is relationship based, right? It is not, I think American business culture is very transactional, right? Which has its pros and cons. Whereas I think Saudi culture, which I think is quite Middle Eastern really, is also similar to the culture we're used to in Asia, which is relationship-based. They have to learn about you, share in the culture, literally sort of break bread with each other, know each other, and then basically we can start building business on the basis of a lot of mutual trust.
It's a trust, and especially in GCC, it's all about trust. Like I studied in Saudi. I studied computer engineering at Cambridge University. I was actually teaching assistant when I finished my master's degree.
Amazing.
And I'm just waiting for the moment when the fully regulation for crypto side is open.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just go back, take my bag and go back home.
Yes.
Because we are like Chinese. Both of us are hungry.
Yes. Yeah.
And when I say food, no, hungry for success, hungry
Yes.
for achieving something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I work with Chinese mainly. So,
Yes.
and I'm happy that you took this step, and many tried and failed actually. So to gain the trust is not easy, and you managed to gain it means you made a big milestone for the entire industry actually to enter to something like that from the Middle East. Actually, Saudi, the people, I just saw statistics. The number one in Saudi, they are like more than 4.8 million people are trading crypto.
Mm-hmm.
And second is Egypt, third is Morocco, and etc. So you have that, and they have the time, they have good internet, right? And
The infrastructure
they have
is
the
great.
financial capability in the average range to still do things, right?
Yes.
And it's Saudi.
Yes. I mean, basically, if you think about what are the impacts that we can help create.
Mm.
So, for instance, our role in Hong Kong, many people look at Hong Kong and don't realize that Hong Kong is a gateway to and from China, right? And so Hong Kong opening up for crypto regulation, being friendly, they just announced not only the Bitcoin spot ETF, but
Ethereum
an
as
Ethereum
well, yes.
ETF, right? Plus, we're based in Hong Kong. Really what Hong Kong is doing is opening up officially, eventually, the China market in some form or fashion, right? And so that's kind of that gateway. Now imagine what would happen if a place like Saudi actually started to properly adopt basically the whole Web3 blockchain crypto industry and started to sort of have a real framework around that. I think it's going to supercharge the region and consequentially also the world. Because also I think of Saudi in the next decades to come as kind of a Saudi age, right? Because you have not only just a top-down driven leadership, but you have a desire to really change the country, and you have a whole nation that wants to see that change. At least from what we've seen, there's a lot of positive momentum around that, which is very difficult. But if you look at the state of the world, not many countries in the world are unified in their desire to bring change.
100%,
right?
yes.
And again, we saw this in China, and we see the same in Saudi. So we think there's that potential, which is why we also invested in the region and basically decided that we're going to fully back and support the Saudi effort together.
Inshallah. Now, we finished Saudi. When are you going to start learning Arabic, by the way? For me, the biggest thing I wish when I was young to learn Chinese. Since most of my friends are Chinese, it's really difficult. Now, the question to you now. I'm going to Hong Kong, you're going to Saudi. We're swapping here.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I have the privilege of the time to learn sort of Arabic, I would love to. I have actually Arabic friends. But the thing is about at least our counterparties, they speak such great English. That essentially, we don't really need to learn Arabic. And I think, again, that does say something about the reflection. I remember back in the day when people were going to China for the first time, they always thought that China wasn't going to evolve much because people didn't speak English. And then I look at the statistic and I discovered that there were more Chinese people in China learning English than there were Americans as a population,
True.
right? And they would go, wait a second. So it's not a question of sort of if but when. Because eventually, those 280 to 300 million people learning English will learn good English, and then it will basically help propel China to the global stage, which is exactly what happened.
That's true. Now, a new point. We've seen the market change recently, especially after Pepe. Pepe came and it made a revolution where the NFT people who didn't know anything about crypto, didn't even know how to use Uniswap. I was like the third guy calling Pepe. It was like 250K. And we made videos to teach people how to actually use Uniswap, how to copy the contract address, etc. So the story there, it made a big shift to happen. And let's be honest, the market structure changed a lot. So from that day till today. So now it's like you have this, in my kind of opinion, not right practices, which is the pre-sale, but people are raising 50 million within few hours. with no KYC, no nothing, just Wild West. And of course, that's illegal, but they're doing it. But the point is not here. They're shifting the industry. And now you're seeing also NFT projects are making games to issue a token. Because, the chance of surviving at the moment, they need to, to shift where the liquidity and the demand of the generation, which is most of them are like crazy apes. They just want to do whatever that makes them money, and they just move together as a crew, right? So why I'm saying all this, today you have, as a venture capital, a team, and this team is doing a criteria for selecting projects, etc., etc. Yet, in my humble opinion, that the space is moving even faster than anyone on the planet. The way of changing is like...
Agree.
So, have you ever thought of, let's say, making something called community voting council, where they can actually influence the Animoca brand at some level? It doesn't mean it's execution, no, just influence. That, hey guys, we having a meme token with the game, and we are all crazy degen people who actually really crazy and degen. Like if they put one time I made a joke, right? I said, I'm gonna make my own token. Oh shit, now they're gonna know it's a joke. Anyways, I said, I just did that. I reached 3.2 million views. I got contacted by everyone I know, then from Pepe, everyone community, and even VCs. They told me when. It reached to 3.2 million. I'm like,
yes.
Oof, these people, like, they're hungry for something mad. So this madness, without regulations, it's becoming Wild West, because they're putting an address, as I said, no KYC, no AML, nothing.
Sure.
But their voice is important. Is that a part of your consideration, to have them like a council of a community vote where they can actually influence at some level your decisions?
So we already do this with Mochaverse.
Okay.
So for instance, when you take a look at, and while we don't do this for investment decisions yet, this is part of the roadmap. For instance, when you're looking at DAO governance, for instance, for ApeCoin, basically the Mochaverse holders, the NFT holders, are actually using a part of our treasury of ApeCoin to decide essentially how to vote for certain things. So in other words, we've delegated our sort of management, shall we say, of the decisions of a multi-billion-dollar DAO to our community. And every 2 weeks, they vote on proposals, and we don't vote as a company, they do so. And actually, we want to do this with all of our token holdings, right? I mean, we're sitting on billions of dollars of tokens, many of them that can be used in governance, and those basically become the assets in which basically those sort of Mochaverse holders, which are a collection of basically Web3, maybe some are investors, maybe some of them are degen, whatever it is, they basically become our voice and they're part of our members. So that's
But
really
let's go a
helping us
little
there.
bit back. What is Mochaverse? You jumped like everyone know.
Right.
What is Mochaverse?
Mochaverse is basically, it started off as an NFT collection,
Okay.
and which we launched 8,888 basically NFTs, which are basically only given originally. It was a very low mint in terms of cost, like less than $100, and only our portfolio companies or employees or people who had some relationship with Animoca Brands, for instance, holding some of our token projects in the past or whatever, had an ability to mint them. So really, it was a very sort of, I would say, Animoca community build up, and the idea was, how do we build essentially a network starting with NFTs, as a way to basically sort of create a sharing of our network effect to basically people in Web3. And that was the birth of Mochaverse. Today, the Mochaverse NFT floor price is about 4.4 ETH.
Okay.
So it was, I think, in last year, probably the best performing NFT in terms of value. But of course, the price was like $100. So, it was literally almost like a free mint. But now, basically, it's brought a lot of sort of momentum. We have this thing called Mocha ID, which is basically a way in which users can create their sort of, even with KYC, basically their ID, which basically builds their reputation, their on-chain reputation. We have 1.3 million and growing users on that. And they're basically people who play games like Pixels and drive utility and drive value into those ecosystems. So it's really sort of, you can think of it as our kind of publishing platform, right? But I want to touch a little bit on this topic about, basically, how I guess you're talking about meme coins, right? I think of meme coins as basically a cultural expression of our time.
True.
Right? So I don't think of meme coins as, we may think it's a joke, we may think it's ridiculous, but that's the state of the world that some of those people feel we are in, right?
It's entertainment.
Yes, it's entertainment, but it's also to some degree desperation. When you take a look at, for instance, the state of the world, right? the 1 percentile, which is becoming more like a 0.1 percentile. But anyway, the rich are just becoming richer, and the poor are becoming poorer. The middle class is getting squeezed out. The Gini coefficient is getting worse and worse, and that has a lot to do with how capitalism is constructed today, right? And there really, if you want to sort of make money as an investor in the space, you can either invest in the high end of the segment, which is basically real estate or luxury goods. I mean, the richest person in Europe is the Arnault family, which is basically selling, luxury goods, which is not a utility everyone needs. It's really just a utility for the sort of, 1 percentile. The other way to play it is the one that would include more people into the financial ecosystem. And that to me is basically what Web3 and crypto represent. And meme coins are a part of that expression. You kind of can say that GameStop was the beginning of that expression. Like today, for instance, people hold GameStop shares, despite the fact that it's not nearly as valuable as before, simply as a sort of pride of honor. It's part of the culture. It's to say, I have the shares, and that to me is a statement. And I think some of the meme coins have that same feeling. Just like fashion, you're not going to have most of these meme coins survive, but some of them will remain as these cultural artifacts. And NFTs are kind of the same. They're representation of the network effects. And as an investor, we look at these projects and try to measure the network effect. So this is the point. So community is a measure of network effect. In Web3, when you look at tokens, whether it's fungible or non-fungible, its real value doesn't lie in its, let's call it equity construction. Like people think, is there a dividend? Is there a token drop? That's one way to look at it. But the real value, we think, is in measuring its network effect. You don't buy an Ethereum token or a Solana token specifically because you think that it's going to pay you a dividend, right? You're buying these tokens because you want to be a member and partake in its network effect, right? And that's basically where I think the long-term value will accrue. And so we look at that. So if you think an L1, L2 chain, or even a meme coin, has a large network effect with a really strong following that is there not just for the money but actually for the culture, then it might make sense to invest in them. And they might actually, more than survive the long term because they've built an ecosystem around it, right? So we don't preclude that. And I think it's quite unusual because most investors don't try to measure network effects. They try to just look at sort of, the profits and so on, which makes it very difficult for them, I think, to look at Web3. Also, one other thing, just like you mentioned us as a VC. So we are investors, but we're not investors out of a fund. We're investors out of our own balance sheet, right? So as a consequence, while we do venture capital style investing, we can take a very long-term view because we don't have a fund life cycle, right? We basically just redeploy our own capital. And that also changes the way that we can make these investments because we can look at the longer term.
Perfect. I can speak with you on so many topics and I can go deep, but because of the time, so I'm
happy to go any way you want.
No, yes. Because you have an event after, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct, actually, yes.
So one of the things that confused me a lot, I liked it, but I got so confused about Animoca. For me, Animoca, especially from the name Animoca, which is anime,
yes,
it's like mainly games, like in this industry. But then suddenly, I'm talking to one of my friends, Animoca Invest. What are you doing? Real world as supply chain. I'm like, okay, there's a guy from the US, which is supply chain, Indonesia, etc. And he told me like Animoca. I'm like, what has Animoca to do with supply chain? And then suddenly AI, and suddenly like DeFi. So I got totally confused. So either I want to know the reason of jumping in this industry. You're spreading to become bigger than games. So maybe I want to know the reason why, number one. Number two,
sure.
Maybe, if I'm not mistaken, it needs to be rebranded so it shows because the perspective is just going to that side only. Yeah. So it makes that confusion.
Yeah. So first, we believe Animoca Brands has this motto in basically building the shared network.
Yeah.
So our idea basically is that all of the networks that we're building in Web3 collide with each other and therefore benefit in the construction of that growth. So meaning that, gaming won't grow as a standalone game. It grows because other games are in the ecosystem or guilds and that kind of stuff sort of partake in it. And one of the lessons that we learned, and by the way, we made AI investments actually earlier before we did gaming investments. But I'll get to that later. Is that, when you think about the Web3 gaming ecosystem, we only realized a little bit later, around 2020, that actually gaming in Web3 cannot work without financial rails. That was something that many people still even today in Web2 gaming don't understand.
True.
Right? They look at Web3 gaming and they don't understand the financial network effects. And what really propelled Web3 gaming was DeFi Summer, right? And the platforms that didn't have DeFi summer, or we didn't have sort of DeFi platforms, like for instance Flow, for instance, even though at that point in time in early 2021, Flow had probably the most popular NFT with NBA Top Shot, couldn't sustain its success because one, it didn't have interoperability, and it also didn't have the financial network risk because it didn't have DeFi. And that basically made us realize how deeply entrenched the sort of financial sort of networks are around that. And we are really looking at sort of ways in which Web3 has more adoption, right? Which means we invest in companies that bring more adoption. So they could be having brands, they could be making entertainment and culture, or they could be basically L1, L2s, for instance. Right? So it's very broad that way, but as long as you build in Web3. Now, during the bear market, there were a number of companies that we invested in that basically semi-abandoned blockchain because it didn't seem fashionable to do so. Frankly, we do feel like obviously that's not what we wanted to see. But as an investor, you can't always get it right. We are totally perfectly fine with projects that don't succeed. But we're less fine with the idea that people take capital to build Web3 and then don't build it in Web3, right? That to us feels something a little bit more like, ooh, right? That's not what we invested money.
That's your mission.
Exactly, that's not our mission. Yes. Our mission is to basically bring digital property rights, and that's only possible through Web3. So that's the broader mission. So for instance, one area, we are very bullish on and have started deploying capital literally a year ago was education. Right? And again, people don't...
you have
Open
EDU.
Campus. Yeah, EDU, Open
yes.
Campus, and also TinyTap and a bunch of other companies. And again, we think as an infrastructure, education is super important. But just like gaming, remember in 2018, when we started talking Web3 gaming, nobody took us seriously. We talked blockchain gaming and it was like, who cares about gaming? It's only for kids, right? Now everyone's talking about Web3 gaming, right? And again, we think that is a way in which we can bring more mass adoption, we can bring more utility, we can bring better messaging, and we think the same can happen with education. Because we are balance sheet investors, we're not momentum investors in the classic sense, right? If you had asked any other investor to invest in Web3 gaming or NFTs in 2018, they would have said, no way. And this is what happened. And the reason they did that is because it wasn't clear where the industry would go. Whereas, we're firm believers because we're also builders and operators, that in order to succeed in the space we want to do, we have to kind of invest and build against the future we want to see. So in other words, if rather than see where the market is going, let's see how we can make that market. Right? True. And so, of the 450 investments, 150 plus are in games, and we'll continue to.
So what is the total? No, you're very fast in this part.
Yes.
How many total investment?
450 plus.
450 plus investment, and
yes.
150 of them
are in games,
fully in games.
Yes,
okay.
and then it's mixed. I mean, we actually have like slides around this that are fairly public. It's like in DeFi, it's in infrastructure, L1, L2s,
supply chain,
some supply chain, wallets, right? Like all sorts of things that we basically hope will help build and construct
the ecosystem
as a whole. So we're ecosystem investors, and of course,
CCC. That's the message I want to get.
CCC.
So no, ecosystem investors.
Yes.
Because now everyone see it as gaming. So like every game. Oh, we are looking for Animoca. But you are not only game.
No.
You're an ecosystem investor.
We are an ecosystem
Maybe
investor.
that's the rebrand. You just said it now.
Yes.
You said the new slogan happening in the show.
Yes. I think, we do talk about the ecosystem. I think, in many cases, when you think about the growth and scale of the space, we also find that inspiration builds on top of each other. Like, for instance, gamification extends beyond games. I mean, if you think about all the sort of DEXs and many of the DeFi
they're all
products,
games.
They're basically gamified, and they're just different type of games.
Even their name is game.
Exactly, right? And they're fun and so on, right? So again, you have these type of sort of ecosystems that are constructed, and like NFT collections as well. I mean, they're not only about games, it's about culture, but this culture will then also create games itself. So they kind of tie to each other.
To be honest, I want to continue more, but because you have things to do.
Sure.
Guys, be sure to follow Animoca and Yat Siu. Know more about them. The guy here, nothing is prepared. He saw organic chat. Yat Siu, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you. It's not just a room.
It's a room of Eljaboom.
Let's go.
Let's go. I don't want your kitty, I'm just tryna play with Moon. We could hit the city, baby, what you tryna do? Catch me out in Quirksville, big shout out to Doom. I'm looking at the floor price, hey Brody, where